The 1989 film Do the Right Thing, directed by Spike Lee, set in the backdrop of a Brooklyn neighborhood where the hate, bigotry, and racial tensions between diverse communities have amplified on the hottest day of the year, which cumulatively leads to an eruption of violence. Presented in chronological order without following a conventional three-act structure, the film goes on a deep dive into politics and racism, in which the film suggests that people unfortunately view doing the right thing in different ways when it falls under the context of racism and racial inequality, as it is largely subjective and dependent on the person and their background. There's no definitive answer as to whether what Mookie did at the end of the film is right or wrong, because people interpret his action of throwing a bin into Sal's pizzeria and inciting a riot in different ways. We can most positively guess the director's point of view on the topic, but others may not agree. Spike Lee's directorial style within the narrative and use of mise-en-scene, cinematography, editing, and sound in regard to film form shape and lead audiences to sympathize with every party involved within the film, most especially with the black community. The film's purpose to provoke audiences to develop a deeper sense of empathy and a greater understanding of the implicit and complex dynamics of racism from all perspectives will help them recognize that differing approaches to addressing racial injustice exist, where one encourages a peaceful outlook over the issue, whereas the other deems that violence is necessary as means of self-defense. In the context of the proposed question, did Mookie do the right thing? The audience is pushed to comprehend why Mookie chose violence, in which we are to believe that any action against oppression is better than no action. The point of contention of the final act of the film is to not worry about the moralities of Mookie's action of inciting a mob to burn up Sal's pizzeria in terms of right and wrong. In fact, in an interview with Spike Lee, he stated, "White people still ask me why Mookie threw the can through the window. 20 years later, they're still asking me that. Without any discussion, me as an audience can already assume why. No black person ever in 20 years, no person of color has ever asked me why," the director later added. Additionally, he says, "I want to clear up something once and for all. Mookie did not throw the garbage can through the window to divert the mob from jumping on Sal, like some have theorized. He threw the garbage can through the window because he just saw one of his best friends get murdered in cold blood by the NYPD. Spike Lee firmly holds a hand to help us cross the bridge, to be able to place ourselves in Mookie's shoes and emphasize his anger and hurt. If not now, by the end of the film, we too should react angrily to Radio Raheem's unjustly death. Because while Mookie's action is not honorable in the technical sense, by questioning the right's justification, people are subconsciously valuing bright property over the life of a black man. Spike Lee plants seeds of this empathy into our minds with 4 particular scenes or segments, the first being a scene shared between Mookie and Pino. Despite the civil rights movement pushing black people to the reaches of equality, unfiltered racism and discrimination still exist, and prejudice is still either silently or outwardly expressed, particularly from white people. This is exemplar of the character of Pino, who is openly racist against black people. As Spike Lee had perfectly put it, with race is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but I'll never say there's been no progress. The struggle continues. Even though Mookie and Pino are co-workers, Pino is still unafraid to explicitly spout with racist rhetorics and slurs at Mookie's face. As such, the dialogue in the scene is key in order to better understand Mookie's frustrations. But first off, the discrimination within the scene begins with a zoom out, in which Pino aggressively takes the phone from Mookie to ring in pizza orders, after which he belittles Mookie for his uselessness in regard to the job by belting out a racial slur. How come N-words are so stupid? The camera remains framed in a medium shot and pans to the right, revealing new areas of the setting, which consist of a cigarette dispenser as a prop. Instead of fighting Pino over the use of the slur, as most would, Mookie calmly tries to teach Pino a lesson and expose the hypocrisy of his racism, with the dialogue being edited with short reverse shots, where the 2 characters cut back and forth in their conversation, staring at each other with disdain off-screen. Mookie proceeds to dismantle Pino's bigotry and points out his contradictions, in which he asks Pino to list out his favorite athletes, movie stars, and so on and so on. And of course, they all end up being black. Pino attempts to defend himself by coining his black idols as token exceptions, while dismissing the greater population of black people. Pino's explanations fall flat in Mookie's ears, and thus the viewer's ears too. The short reverse shot helps maintain continuity and amplifies the tension and internal conflict between Pino and Mookie, with an emphasis on the clashing viewpoints of black people and black history. As the diegetic dialogue between the 2 characters persists, the audience begins to view the cigarette dispenser to be symbolic of a divide between Mookie and Pino, a divide between their opinions and beliefs, rationale versus emotion, and prejudice, heads and tails. Additionally, the faint non-diegetic classical music in the background does not compete with dialogue, in which the given clarity further signals the importance of this much-needed conversation, and thus convinces viewers to pay more attention to it. The seasoned application of soft and warm lighting minimizes the harshness of the shadows, which highlights the details of the character's facial expressions, with Mookie's eyes particularly indicating that he's fed up with Pino's inability to be open-minded to his talking points. The casualty of Pino's blatant racism and his lack of concern for Mookie's feelings make him out to be an antagonist, angering audiences and driving sympathy for Mookie. We depart the scene knowing that Pino is hidden admiration for black people, despite his racist judgments, and that Mookie had one argument, akin to us wanting him to fight against racial injustice. Within the plot story duration of a day, much hate is festered within the Brooklyn neighborhood and a community that is intertwined in it. As the heat wave rages on, an infamous racial slur montage sequence ensues, which highlights the mounting racial tensions and misguided resentment between the ethnic communities. The racists hurl slurs back and forth, insulting one another with stereotypes. This expose of racial animosities and mutual suspicion serve as warm-ups for the ultimate bonfire, in which the embers culminate in the death of Radio Raheem at the climax. The montage is director Spike Lee's trademark style of making characters break the fourth wall and directly talk to the camera. This montage of collection of scenes is thus made out to look like a series of POV shots, where the different ethnic groups choose to address the audience, being us, and then we as the audience acting as the perceiver of a bombardment of slurs, having our empathy tested to its limits. The POV sense of the shots allow us to feel as though Spike Lee is directly encouraging us to put more focus to observing the parallelism of the narrative and his overall message, and draw similarities and comparisons between the ethnic groups. The parallels ensure that we know that every racial group in America harbors some form of racism and bigotry, and that we must understand the futility of all, and how it can leak from an interpersonal level to an institutional and structural level, which leaves everyone ununified. Via the parallels, we can also see the absence of slurs directed towards white/Western Caucasian culture, represented by a cop, the same cop who ends up killing Radio Raheem at the end of the film. This purposeful exclusion is a subtle hint as to how the white power structure within America to benefit from the hate and the divide between minorities, which enables such a structure to remain unscathed. This montage is edited with a cross-cutting technique, where there's simultaneous alternating scenes set in different locations that are stitched together. The cross-cutting introduces some spatial discontinuity, but commonly works in the context of a montage. The supply of unrestricted knowledge, though, further strengthens the parallels present within the sequence. In regards to other cinematographical cues, each shot from the montage begins with a tracking forward shot or a dolly in to medium shot, with the characters centered within the frame, which balances out all the visual elements within the frame. The camera movement also greatly amplifies the power of the PV shots, with the handheld feeling contributing to the authenticity of the montage's message to the audience's POV. The scene is employed with a deep space composition, which is why both the foregrounds and backgrounds are in sharp focus. This technique allows us to properly navigate the environments and see the sweat dripping from the skin, which is representative of the relationship between the simmering heat and the increasing racial tensions, particularly in the shot with Pino. We can see bits of his Italian culture in the background plane of the kitchen, which is to be later verbally defiled by Mookie, coupled with the fact that Pino's scene is also edited to come right after the Mookie's, further aiding the effectiveness of the conflict between Mookie and Pino from the previous scene. Concerning the mise-en-scene, the stylized staging, acting, performance of the characters within the montage is exaggerated to convey the hateful delivery of the lines. On another note, Pino wears a gold necklace as part of his costume, which directly contradicts the gold chain part of the racist rant, which further shows his hypocrisy. The juxtaposition of racist viewpoints represents itself as a wall that prevents mutual understanding. Viewers are thus implored to realize that mutual resentment founded on racial tension must be redirected into cooperation in order to dismantle systemic oppression and defeat common enemy, which is an institution where it is deemed acceptable for law enforcement to take the life of an innocent man based on someone's race. Radio Raheem's love and hate speech and confrontation scene between Radio Raheem and Sal demonstrate opposing forces as a motif within the film. Love and hate, hot and cold, black and white, the good and the bad. The magnitude of the clashing of such opposing forces in relation to the realities of systemic racism and inequality and the cycle of violence that comes with it sometimes do not allow for peaceful and good approaches to effectively work as well as we would like it to. The fuss the audience will have to lend is agreed understanding to Mookie's own action at the end of the film. In regards to Radio Raheem's love and hate speech first, the scene begins with a forward tracking shot that transitions to a POV shot from Mookie's perspective as he runs into Radio Raheem, watching him talk to the camera. Consistently set in a medium close-up shot, Radio Raheem displays his brass knuckles to the camera, which amplifies his own hate on the left hand and love on the right. He boxes with the camera, all whilst reciting his speech about the story of good and evil and how both hands are always in conflict, but love will ultimately prevail. Given the choice of hands, the individual brass knuckle pair was worn on. The costuming of the brass knuckles encapsulates the idea of right and wrong, and the splitting crossroads to racial harmony, where violence can either be actively discouraged or deemed necessary in the chaos. The same idea is echoed within the film's main soundtrack, Fight the Power, which is diegetically played in the background from Raheem's boombox. The hip-hop song is also symbolic of resistance and empowerment against the face of oppression. The lessons from the scene are reflected in the interaction between Radio Raheem and Sal in a scene that immediately follows, in which Radio Raheem tries to order pizza, but is aggressively refused service until he turns off his music. The soundtrack from the previous love and hate monologue scene carries onto this scene, and the volume of the song increases as Radio Raheem enters the pizzeria due to the laws of vivid sound perspective. His entrance is also coupled with a signature Spike Lee dolly zoom, which loudly announces presence visually. Sal engages in the shouting match Radio Raheem as he states his meal order with an intimidating voice. Sal demands a shot of his radio, Sal demands to shut off his radio might seem logical and rational, but it has implicit consequences that would make Raheem feel as though he'll be renouncing his whole culture and conceding to the white man's wishes, since his boombox is a prop that could be regarded as a cultural identity symbol. Within the scene, Sal also states, "You come into Sal's, there's no music, no rap, no music." He subconsciously makes a racist distinction between the African American founder of rap genre from the music he would classify as normal. Sal even calls it jungle music during the film's climax, and just like how he destroys Raheem's radio, his request for silence in his workplace also means the silence of the black community. There are Kante shots of Dutch angles that occur during the argument, which is stylistic of Spike Lee's. The Dutch angles are narratively synonymous with the two characters' increased agitation with each other. The extreme close-ups further have a claustrophobic effect on the viewer, and the deep focus used on shallow shots and a selective or shallow space composition used on radio Raheem shots visually indicate how much anger he's holding in, and how the lack of control over the situation mentally affecting him. Worse, the orange color palette and the warm tones present inside Sal pizzerias can be connotated with the increased hatred bubbling between them as well. Radio Raheem eventually agrees to Sal's demands, but while watching the heated conversation, you cannot help but have the love and hate speech ring in your mind, as they are in direct opposition to each other during the whole time. The same way how love and hate and good and evil are always battling each other. The setting of the pizzeria and the pictures of famous Italian Americans that hang on the wall behind Raheem, in combination with the first argument between the two characters, foreshadow Radio Raheem's featured unjust demise and Sal's complicity in it, as contrasted with the evocative film credits consisting of ideologies from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Raheem preached for love, but he was also treated with life-ending hate in return. Because of this, Mookie decides to choose hate, but is it right? That depends on how you see it, but hopefully by now you get it. Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing still garners debates on the events that occurred during his runtime, but the intention is not to provide us the answers to the question, but instead to spark discussion and offer valuable insights as to why certain characters made certain decisions, the way they did, like Mookie. Spike Lee sought to influence viewers from all backgrounds to emphasize with the plight of the black people and the systemic oppression that they face. Not only that, via the Do the Right Thing's film form, Spike Lee manages to convince his audience to acknowledge the hidden biases. Did you react most strongly to the pizzeria or the unfair murder of a minority? And what does that say about you? A portion of the audience will then inadvertently realize that they have valued a pizzeria over a human life.